Hello there, welcome to Planet America's Weekend Edition, coming to you once again from the Situation Room. I'm John Barron.
I'm Licciardello, and we have a situation.
Tensions between President Trump and Elon Musk have now exploded, and they're playing out in a very public way.
I'm very disappointed in Elon. I've helped Elon a lot.
From bromance to rust up, Trump and Musk slugging it out, and things are getting personal.
Meanwhile, Trump has issued a new travel ban and ordered an investigation into Joe Biden. But first,
President Trump's big, beautiful domestic policy bill, which adds trillions of dollars to America's debt through tax cuts, has led to a big, beautiful dummy spit by Elon Musk. Just days after he left his post in the Trump administration, first came this.
Elon Musk called the bill a, quote, disgusting abomination that will increase the deficit. He went on to say of what's known as the big, beautiful bill, shame on those who voted for it. You know you did wrong.
And Elon wasn't done there, not even close, renaming it the Debt Slavery Bill and tweeting a poster from the 2003 Quentin Tarantino film Kill Bill. Then he implored his 220 million ex-followers to call your senator, call your congressman. Bankrupting America is not okay. Kill the bill. Speaker Mike Johnson, who herded the Republican cats to get this bill through the House in the first place, is not too happy with his friend Elon.
With all due respect, my friend Elon is terribly wrong about the one big beautiful bill. We had a long conversation yesterday, he and I.
Speaker Johnson argues independent estimates of this bill's negative impact on America's ballooning debt are simply wrong. He thinks the bill will supercharge the American economy.
This is going to be jet fuel. The reason we call it the big beautiful bill is because it is a tremendous pro-growth package entwined in this legislation that is going to make everybody's incomes go up. There's going to be more job opportunity, more opportunity to climb up that economic ladder in America, because job creators, entrepreneurs, and risk takers will have the government off their backs. They will have lower taxes, and they will be expanding their businesses.
Where have we heard that before? Sounds an awful lot like trickle-down 2.0. Speaker Johnson also says there will be massive savings coming in a soon-to-be-unveiled Doge bill, but everyone knows that a standalone government cost-cutting bill is going to face an uphill battle in Congress. Meanwhile, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt has been trying to convince reporters that Elon's attacks have been no big deal.
Look, the president already knows where Elon Musk stood on this bill. It doesn't change the president's opinion. This is one big, beautiful bill, and he's sticking to it.
But then earlier today, this bust-up got very big indeed. The two former allies lashing out at each other with dueling posts on their respective social media sites. Trump accused Musk basically of going crazy.
Elon was wearing thin. I asked him to leave. I took away his EV mandate that forced everyone to buy electric cars that nobody else wanted, that he knew for months I was going to do, and he just went crazy.
To which Elon Musk replied, such an obvious lie, so sad. Trump then upped the ante.
The easiest way to save money in our budget, billions and billions of dollars, is to terminate Elon's governmental subsidies and contracts. I was always surprised that Biden didn't do it.
Sound a bit like a threat? Elon Musk hit back with, in light of the president's statement about cancellation of my government contracts, SpaceX will begin decommissioning its Dragon spacecraft immediately. Now that could effectively cut off the International Space Station from resupply, and he wasn't done yet. Elon Musk then claimed that Trump is in the files about child sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein, tweeting, that is the real reason they have not been made public. Musk offered no proof to back up those claims, but he did also claim that Trump's tariffs will cause a recession in the second half of the year. The glove's well and truly off at this point. Musk agreed with a post saying that Trump should be impeached and replaced with J.D. Vance, and then put up a poll about starting a new political party. Meanwhile, Trump had some more thoughts about all that.
I'm very disappointed in Elon. I've helped Elon a lot. I don't know what it is. It's sort of Trump derangement syndrome, I guess they call it.
So we have seen a spectacular bust-up today, Chaz, but I guess none of us are at all surprised, are we?
No, people were predicting this. And I've got to say, Trump had to do this. He really did. I mean, I'm not always on Trump's side, but he gave Elon Musk 24 hours of free hits against him and his bill. That bill has to pass for Trump. It just has to pass. It's so important for Trump, right?
It's a laundry list of things that he promised he would do in last year's election.
Yeah, not to mention it's got the debt ceiling hike. It has to pass. And and he let Elon Musk take a free swing for 24 hours. He didn't say a word. He then sent out Mike Johnson to say Trump is very disappointed as a very strong hint. And then Elon Musk came out the next day and upped the ante. Trump just could not take it. He had to respond. And then Elon Musk escalated, and then Trump escalated, and then off we go to the races. It's not over yet. This is going to keep on going.
No doubt.
Yeah, so I actually, this is one situation where I think Trump had no choice but to do this. In terms of, especially given, you've got to remember, Musk has killed a bill before. He's got blood on his hands as far as bills go. In December, he did the same thing for a bill that didn't matter so much. Trump wasn't president then. And he actively actually destroyed the bill. So Trump could see this coming, I think, as soon as Elon started again. So he had to respond.
The big question now is, and Elon Musk continued to rant on X, saying that basically he won the election for Donald Trump. Now there's, I mean, he was the biggest individual donor to Trump. He gave $288 million towards an election that Donald Trump won by 250,000 votes in 3 swing states. So Elon Musk, I guess, can claim, but then the question is, well, did he really think that $288 million bought him electric vehicle subsidies or clean energy funds in various states that he still supports?
Look, first of all, Trump has spent about a third as much as Kamala Harris did. He won in spite of money, not because of money, no matter what Elon Musk says. That's number one. Number two, in terms of what caused this, let's not assume that the EV thing is right. I mean, do you believe anything else Trump says? Why would you believe that explanation? That might be right, that might not be right. There's other reasons. I personally think part of it might be the fact that Elon feels jilted about being booted out of the administration. I know there was that time limit, 130 days. When was the last time that Trump cared about the law? Like, if he wanted Elon Musk to stay there, he would have stayed there. And Elon Musk, when he first announced he was going, it was only going for a couple of days a week. And then he's slowly being pushed back. So I think he wanted to stay, and I think he feels jilted. Yeah. So I think that's part of it. And there's other reasons as well. But can I just say one thing quickly, because I know he can't stay forever. Elon Musk declaring, I know he's angry, but declaring I might strand the International Space Station, that's a massive wake-up call for America. I mean, they should already realise this, but if they didn't already, that should be a massive wake-up call. He has too much power. He controls the internet for large proportions of that country. He has too much power as a defence contractor, and like they should just remove some of his contracts just for security purposes, because the man is not stable, he's on drugs, and he lashes out when he's angry, and he's the most powerful man in the country. Yeah. This is untenable. Yeah.
Trump handed him a whole lot more power when he made him the head of Doge and let his minions go into all sorts of government agencies, including getting a lot of very sensitive social security data from tens of millions of Americans. The question now as well is going to be, does Elon Musk seek to weaponise this? What is the future of Doge? There are reports that people who work for Doge are now saying, well, are we going to get the bullet now? I mean, if this bust-up is as big as all of that, does the whole Doge project now get jettisoned and Trump basically dissociates himself from anything to do with Elon Musk?
For PR reasons, that might happen, but it doesn't have to happen because Doge was never run by Elon Musk. Elon Musk is a governmental fool. The person who ran Doge was Vought, who is the head of the OMB. He's always been the guy running Doge. He's still the guy running Doge. Elon Musk was the figurehead. But for PR reasons, they might diss it. We'll see.
Yeah, indeed we will. Well, for more on all of this, we're joined by Catie Edmondson. She's Congressional Correspondent for the New York Times. Catie, welcome to Planet America's Situation Room. What were you thinking today as all of this was unfolding in the Oval Office and then on social media in real time? It was a real pass the popcorn kind of stuff.
It was really a remarkable implosion, and I think, look, the writing has been on the wall for some time. I don't think it was necessarily a surprise that this coalition between the President of the United States and the world's richest man, I think we all thought that inevitably it would end in some sort of blow-up. But I think still to watch it unfold in this way, which really was sort of a rapid series of tweets, Truth Socials, which is the president's own social media company, plus to see the president really unload in the Oval Office on Elon Musk really was sort of a remarkable and sort of head-spinning series of events.
Catie, is it possible that Musk could actually be excommunicated from the MAGA movement, or is he just too big to fail? He owns too much of the support base.
There are a number of Republicans on Capitol Hill, where I cover, who are sort of libertarian mavericks. These are people like Rand Paul, the senator from Kentucky, people like Thomas Massey, the congressman also from Kentucky, who have really allied themselves with Elon Musk, who continue to be really strong supporters of him. But I think what's more notable is really where the rest of the Congress is. And we spoke to a number of members of Congress today who were embracing Elon Musk in a huge way when he first came to the Hill after President Trump won, when they still had a cozy relationship. And we saw them start to distance themselves from Elon, saying, the person that I support is President Trump, right? The person that our voters, in fact, cast their ballots for is President Trump. And so I think Elon may continue to have sort of a sphere of influence among some of these more libertarian-minded Republicans, but we're starting to see the tables turn very quickly among a lot of mainstream conservatives who want to, again, show their support is solidly with President Trump.
And Catie, what would you say is at the heart of this, really? President Trump characterised it as, well, Elon's upset because we're getting rid of those subsidies for electric vehicles that nobody wants. Elon Musk, of course, is saying this big, beautiful bill adds trillions of dollars to the debt. We can't do that while also trying to do what Doge is doing and cutting out billions from government spending. Is it about both those things? Is it about egos, really? What do you put this down to?
I mean, I think it's probably all of the above, but what I think about is that when you look at President Trump and his stance towards deficits, towards the debt, he really has an ideology that is not aligned with sort of the old school brand of republicanism, which was, of course, anti-spending, anti-debt. Before he became president, he in fact boasted that he was the king of debt, right? This is someone who wants to deliver some of these campaign promises he made for voters, such as no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, sort of despite what the ultimate cost of those provisions are. Whereas when you hear Elon Musk speak, he really sort of exemplifies the old school sort of Tea Party brand of republicanism, which is, again, anti-debt, anti-spending. The other thing that I'll add that seems to be a particular fixation for Elon is that he doesn't like bills. He doesn't seem to like documents, really, that have lots and lots of pages in them. Of course, the big, beautiful bill that President Trump is moving forward, it's over 1,000 pages. And that's something that we've heard him rail against time and time again. And so, again, I think it's a culmination of all of those factors. But at their core, there seem to be two very different ideologies that these men have.
Catie, on the bill itself, there seem to be three groups of no's for this bill. Those who want fewer Medicaid cuts, those who want more spending cuts, and those who want a smaller debt ceiling hike. What are the numbers in those three groups as far as you know, and which group do you think is most likely to sink the bill?
This is where it gets really tricky, and it's where I don't envy Senate Republican leadership because they have a very small margin of error, right? They can allow basically 3 Republicans in the Senate to defect on this bill to still allow it to pass. And it seems so far, in terms of the senators that we've heard voice public concerns, as if it's almost an equal measure, the number of Republicans who are saying we can't cut too deeply into these federal programs that our constituents rely on, and the number of Republicans that you pointed out, the fiscal hawks, who are saying, in fact, if we want to save this country from our debt issue, we in fact have to cut more deeply into these programs. I will say, however, there have been a number of Republicans, you mentioned Medicaid. There have been a number of Republicans recently who have brought up issues that they have with some of the Medicaid provisions in the bill that the House passed, concerns that it's going to affect, in particular, rural hospitals in their states. And some of those comments actually came from senators I was a little surprised to hear from. People like senators from West Virginia, a very deep red, very pro-Trump state. And so I think figuring out that balancing act is exactly the problem that Senate Republican leaders are trying to solve right now.
So, Catie, this is now in the Senate and there are question marks there. We've also got this strange situation where a number of Republican House members who voted in favour of this bill are now coming out and saying, oh, actually, there are some things in that 1,000 pages that I never quite got around to reading in time before I voted for it. I wish I hadn't voted for it now. Does any of that, is that just political cowardice, or does that have a practical implication for, as this bill is being reconciled, if it passes the Senate and then the House has to reconcile? I mean, where is this heading now?
Well, in a way, that's kind of the $2 trillion question here, right? I do think it's going to be really interesting. We saw a number of those House Republicans who you alluded to who came out and said, I wish I hadn't voted for this bill. There were provisions that I don't agree with. We saw them come out and make those comments. Actually, Elon Musk initially said that he didn't like the legislation. That was sort of the tip of the iceberg of his critical comments. So he made those comments. They came out and they said, yeah, actually, Elon is right. We don't like this bill. I wish I hadn't voted for it. But now that Elon is on the warpath against President Trump, I do think that actually might sort of disrupt some of the dynamics that we were starting to see take root in the House, in terms of some of these Republicans feeling more comfortable criticizing it because Elon was giving them the political cover to do so. I don't think that political cover really is going to exist now that Elon and President Trump are in open warfare. But at the same time, it is a very real consideration that Republican leaders are going to have to consider, is that any changes that are made in the Senate to this legislation ultimately have to be accepted by the Republicans in the House.
Now, to pass this bill with a simple majority, Senate Republicans want to use a process called reconciliation, which theoretically requires approval from the Senate umpire, the parliamentarian. Do you think they're going to stick to that process, or might they just go nuclear and do whatever they like?
The Senate Majority Leader, John Thune, who is a Republican, who I will say was elected as the party leader in the Senate in part because he was seen as someone who would protect the institution, has said that he is not going to override the parliamentarian, that Republicans will respect whatever ruling she ultimately puts out. At really the heart of this issue is whether or not she is going to accept sort of a budget gimmick that Senate Republicans are using to claim that extending the tax cuts President Trump signed into law into 2017 cost nothing, have no impact on the deficit. They're making that argument because they're saying, look, we're simply extending current law. A lot of people, a lot of economists, Democrats would say, you can't actually do the math that way when we know, in fact, we're losing revenue as a result of extending these tax cuts. That is going to be what this issue boils down to, and we will see if Senator Thune sticks to his word in terms of not overruling the parliamentarian.
Catie, in terms of a bit of crystal ball gazing from here after the extraordinary developments of the last 24 hours or so, what are the sort of what ifs for Elon Musk if he really does go rogue? He's basically said, you know, I gave $300 million to this guy. I made you President, Donald Trump. And he's said yes, agreeing to a tweet that said that Trump should be impeached and J.D. Vance should become President of the United States. Now, that could all just be words, or it could also have really serious implications for the presidency of the United States, for congressional races next year if Trump goes full anti-Trump in those primaries for Republican congressional candidates. How bad could this get?
I mean, I think it's an open question, but it is the question that every congressional Republican is asking themselves right now. Elon Musk tweeted, I believe, a couple of days ago, before he was, again, in open warfare with President Trump, that he would find a primary challenger for any Republican who ultimately supports this reconciliation bill, which we know is going to be basically all of them, right, given the math, given the margins in both the House and the Senate. So I think there are a number of Republicans who are wondering if he's actually going to make good on those threats, who know, of course, that he has the money to be able to make that happen. I think it's really more of a question of whether he has the will to do so, particularly when, by definition, this is a bill that is going to require almost a unified Republican House and Republican Senate, almost every single member to pass.
And Catie, after all the horse trading's over with this bill, what changes are you expecting are going to have to be made to get it to pass?
It is such a delicate balancing act. We are hearing from these senators they don't want to cut as deeply into Medicaid as the House version put forward. At the same time, you have conservatives in the House that say, if you do not cut this much spending in Medicaid, we won't support it. I anticipate the changes in the Senate, frankly, to be fairly minimal, but I think the bigger the changes, the more you're going to see those House members revolt, and that is when things start to get really messy here in Washington.
Catie Edmondson, thank you so much for taking the time for us on what I know has been a pretty crazy week there in Washington.
Thank you for having me.
Now, we told you a few months ago about Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro's home being firebombed. The suspect said he targeted Shapiro because of, quote, what he wants to do to the Palestinian people. To be clear, Josh Shapiro was extremely opposed to the tactics of Benjamin Netanyahu. Then last week we saw the murder of 2 young Jewish embassy workers outside a function at the Jewish Museum. According to an FBI affidavit, the shooter was caught on video firing several times at the couple. Then after they fell to the ground, he walked up to them, leant over and shot them a few more times. As one of them tried to crawl away, the shooter followed behind her and shot her again. She sat up and he shot her several more times. 21 bullets were fired all up. The shooter then effectively gave himself up, and as he was being led away, he allegedly said, "I did it for Palestine, I did it for Gaza." That weekend, there was a lot of discussion about that incident in America, with some more extreme activists overtly supporting the shooter. One activist group tweeted out, "We don't condemn armed resistance. We don't condemn direct action. We back the left and want this energy to be more organised as opposed to shunned and isolated." Now, to be clear, while they were both passionate supporters of Israel, the 2 young embassy workers had no direct connection to anything happening in Gaza. One of them was actually a peace worker. Then this week we saw yet another attack, this time on a march in Colorado, raising awareness of the remaining Israeli hostages in Gaza. A man threw 2 Molotov cocktails at the march, leaving 15 people injured. In his police interview, the suspect stated that he hated the Zionist group and he needed to stop them from taking over our land, which he explained to be Palestine. He said that he wanted to kill all Zionist people and he wished they were all dead. There have been 3 main takeaways from this last attack by political types in America. From the left, they've noted that the suspect initially planned on gunning down his victims. He even took a concealed carry class where he learnt how to fire a weapon, but he wasn't allowed to buy a weapon because his US visa had expired. So they see this as an argument for gun control, noting just how much worse this incident could have been had he had a gun. Now, some on the right have connected this incident to the other 2 incidents that I just mentioned, and they say America has a big problem with anti-Semitic terrorism, which they then connect directly to some of the pro-Palestinian protests we've seen over the last few years.
And what more do we need to see, Jake, before we realize this Free Palestine movement is nothing more than a domestic terror organization right now? I mean, we had the killings in Washington a couple of weeks ago. We have this issue in Colorado. We've seen the activities on college campuses now for months and months and months and months. The rise of anti-Semitism in America, the rise in the number of people who have come to America who hold anti-American views, anti-Western views, and anti-Semitic views and are now willing to act on it. It is absolutely outrageous.
And the third group are those who say, no, this incident was about the fact the suspect was an Egyptian national who was allowed to stay in the country after his visa expired.
And we know that this individual, this terrorist, was allowed into this country by the previous administration, was foolishly given a tourism visa, and then was illegally allowed to stay. These individuals are going to be deported, and we're not going to tolerate such violence in our country.
And the people pushing that line also include the president. Now, to be clear, the suspect was let into America on a tourist visa, and he then immediately applied for asylum. That asylum application has not yet been judged, so he was actually in America lawfully at the time of the attack. But John, what is your view? Can anything be taken from any of these incidents, or are they just more crimes in a country with lots of crimes?
Yeah, I think to an extent you're right there. And I do tend to think that in a lot of these cases, no matter what the cause or the justification that the perpetrators use, and this is the same with mass shooting incidents, high school shootings, etc., it's a violent person looking for a cause rather than a person with a cause who resorts to violence as a last resort or as a political statement. It's not always the case, but it is often the case. We are just talking about people who are, for whatever reason, a little bit unstable, become violent, and they justify their violence, but they wanted to hurt people. They wanted to make themselves feel better by doing it. I am concerned when I see things like Scott Jennings there very, very quickly and easily equating anti-Semitism to anti-Americanism, because I think a lot of what is being alleged to be anti-Semitism in America at the moment, including what's happening on university campuses, has real echoes of McCarthyism and claims of anti-Americanism, and that to simply say something is anti-Semitic is enough to shut it right down and to say you cannot say this, you cannot raise your concerns about the IDF's operation in Gaza, for example. And I'll finally note, that I do take with a grain of salt the likes of Scott Jennings and President Trump and others on the right who are now expressing valid concerns about anti-Semitism, who are only concerned with anti-Semitism because it's now coming from the political left, from the pro-Palestinian cause. When it was neo-Nazis who were being anti-Semitic, there were good people on both sides, as I recall, from President Trump. So there's a real hypocrisy here as well, none of which is to justify any violence against any individual or group, and certainly not anti-Semitism, which we know historically is a destructive and abhorrent train of thought, and it's very hard to manage it at a time when a lot of people are looking at what Israel is doing in Gaza, and they have reason to want to protest that because 50,000 dead civilians, including many children, is enough to make a lot of people very angry. No excuse for violence, though.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with the last point, that we definitely should not conflate protesting with violence, and especially protesting the actions of the Israeli government and saying, well, therefore, they hate Jews and they are the same as people who go around killing Jews. Yeah. They are two very, very different things, especially in a country that allegedly believes in free speech. So that's the first thing I would say. I agree with you about that. I do think that America has an anti-Semitism issue, though. I mean, you just need to look at the hate crimes. The FBI hate crimes, record numbers of anti-Semitic hate crimes in 2023. They haven't got the 2024 figures out yet, but it's impossible to ignore the number of violent attacks against Jewish people. Specifically, it's like you just said, like they say it's about Gaza or it's about Palestine, but these are sick people who are going around hurting people, trying to kill people. And I don't know if it's actually because of Gaza or if they're just a bit imbalanced and that's their excuse. It doesn't matter. There's a problem going on in America with anti-Semitic violence. I agree with that. But I actually don't think that's the main takeaway. I think I would add one more incident. I know those three were all about Palestine, but I would add one more incident, Luigi Mangione from the end of last year. Right. Where the
guy who killed the
healthcare executive. And he was celebrated as a hero. I think that there is a problem in America of dehumanising the opposition. I think this has been growing for years now, and it's becoming worse and worse to the point where all of these incidents, these four, plus others I have seen, you go online, you look at the comments, and they are almost universally celebrating the people who commit these acts. Right. There are a lot of people out there who don't think of their opponents as human and think, well, we should do whatever it takes to win our particular battle.
This is the idea that social media trolling has now spilled back into the real world, leading to real physical violence as opposed to just verbal abuse. Yeah. Where it was.
I'm not blaming social media, but I am saying it's a canary in a coal mine. It's an indication of what is going on. That America is so filled with hate at the moment. And by the way, it works on both sides. I've got a great example of this in response to the shooting.
Does this shooting change anything when it comes to the course of the war or the negotiations to end it?
Well, I think it speaks to the importance of the only end of the conflict is complete and total surrender by those who support Muslim terror. In World War II, we did not negotiate a surrender with the Nazis. We did not negotiate a surrender with the Japanese. We nuked the Japanese twice in order to get unconditional surrender. That needs to be the same here. There is something deeply, deeply wrong with this culture, and it needs to be defeated.
Now, he's talking about Muslim terror there, but it's not hard to read between the lines. That's a congressman, by the way. That a congressman is essentially green-lighting the idea of nuking Gaza. And once again, he's on the other side of the coin, but it's the same dehumanisation and othifying your opponents, saying, oh, they're just a bunch of people and we just need to stop them because if we don't stop them, it'll be the end of society. Yeah. And it makes people more and more extreme, and I don't like where it's going. I don't know how to stop it, but I think that's the problem.
Yeah, interesting. President Trump issued a sweeping travel ban against people from 12 nations this week, stopping people coming to America from a range of countries, from Afghanistan all the way through to Yemen. There are also partial restrictions on travel for citizens from 7 other countries. They include Cuba and Venezuela. President Trump cited state links to terrorism as one of the main reasons. He also talked about a lack of screening of people coming on tourism and student visas, general tendency for tourists and students from those particular nations to overstay their visas. Meanwhile, President Trump has also moved to block student visas being issued to students specifically wanting to travel to America to study at Harvard University. Nowhere else. This is another way of turning the screws a bit on that university and the way that it's resisted a lot of Trump administration pressure to screen their staff and their students and even the syllabus that they teach for any possible traces of anti-Semitism. It is worth noting, though, in all of those justifications, there are strengths and weaknesses in some of them that were in this executive order, Chaz. But when talking about terrorism, the perpetrator of that attack in Boulder, Colorado, the flamethrower attack, that was somebody from Egypt.
Yep.
Egypt's not on this list.
Nope.
But you know there are potential solid legal grounds for this to be pursued, though.
Yeah, and also he didn't kill anyone. The person who did kill someone was the second incident I told you about, American citizen.
Yeah.
In fact, if you look at the actual security situation, there's been one person from those full ban countries, one person who has killed someone in a terrorist attack since 1975 on US soil, from any of those countries.
Right.
And in the partial ban countries, there have been 5 since 1975. If we're talking about crime rates, I've got the crime rates here. From all those full ban countries, the national incarceration rate's 370 per 100,000 in 2023, which is 70% below that of native-born Americans. In the partial ban countries, it's 369, so it's exactly the same.
So the terrorism justification, flimsy. Some of it in terms of state sponsors of terrorism, Iran is on the list. You can see where that can be justified. But this overstaying thing seems to be the really what could actually see that this is something that's going to be reviewed in 90 days. We don't know what the courts are going to do with it, but that could be the foundation of it.
Yeah. Look, we saw this in 2017 when Trump first called it a Muslim ban early on, when he didn't know how to get things through court, and they said, "No, you're not doing that." And then he fine-tuned it, and it ended up being a ban on vetting procedures, which is now what he's going with now, to try and come up with some objective measure. The court insists on there being an objective measure, and this is the new objective measure, the overstaying percentage. I actually looked it up because I thought, I wonder how dodgy this is.
Sure.
The numbers stack up. Like, you look at the report, the overstay report which they're citing, and the 22 countries or whatever it is that they've got partial or full bans on, they are the top 22 for overstaying. Like there is no France or England where there's lots of overstays, and they haven't counted it.
Probably means they got AI to put the list together.
Maybe. But yeah, I think that will hold up in court. I think that this will be legal.
Yeah, the overstaying thing, there is some extra nuance there. People assume overstayers, they come here for a 1-month visit and they stay here for 10 years and they apply for asylum. That is the case in some cases. It's also sometimes the case they're here for 4 weeks, they stay for 5 weeks, etc., because they couldn't get an extension on their visa because nobody's picking up the phone back in Sierra Leone where you have to process these things.
Yeah, my point is not that that's a good measure.
It's just justifiable.
It's just the court is just looking for a fig leaf,
Yeah.
and that will be the fig leaf that they get.
Yeah,
so it will hold up, I think.
President Trump has been rattling off a lot of executive orders again this week, including one clearly designed to embarrass his predecessor, Joe Biden. President Trump has ordered a broad investigation into whether Biden covered up a cognitive decline while in the White House and was incapable of executing presidential decisions. President Biden responded to this unprecedented executive order with a statement this week. He said, "I made the decisions during my presidency about the pardons, executive orders, legislation and proclamations. Any suggestion that I didn't is ridiculous and false." Now, Trump supporters will no doubt say, Chaz, that statement was probably written by somebody else as well, using an auto pen. Congressional Republicans, though, they've taken this up a notch. They've now subpoenaed Biden's White House doctor, Kevin O'Connor, to appear later this month. Now, Dr. O'Connor has resisted that, citing doctor-patient confidentiality. But, as you pointed out on Wednesday's show, Chaz, there are all these claims about, whether Biden knew that he was signing executive orders or pardons or pieces of legislation that may have been signed with an auto pen. This is more than just let's demean Joe Biden. It is also about potentially seeking ways of challenging some of those pieces of legislation, those executive orders and those pardons.
Yeah, I think this is what this is entirely about, because to overrule an executive order, some of them are easy. Some of them Trump can just pass by his own executive order. But sometimes when there's a rule, it takes a year, maybe 2 years to go through the painful process of getting rid of it. If they can just say, well, Biden didn't know what he was doing, therefore it's not valid, bang, it's gone. And I think that's what they're trying to do right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'd add one more thing to this, and I think it's at a very sort of personal and petty level from Donald Trump. He knows that historians say that Donald Trump's first term made him the worst president in history. He also knows that in Joe Biden's first 3 years before his obvious decline in 2023, 2024, historians rated Joe Biden very highly. He was in the top 15 of America's presidents since independence. I think Donald Trump wants to continue to discredit Joe Biden and to make himself look better as a result by dragging him down and hopefully he thinks trying to boost himself up.
I'll throw one more in there. He also is notoriously paranoid about dementia because of his father who had dementia. And he knows that runs in his family. He also knows that people are starting to ask questions about him. And he's got 3 more years. And the more he shines the light on Joe Biden, the more it distracts from him. So that works out well for him in both ways.
Yeah, it does. Our guest on Planet America on Wednesday night was the recently returned US Ambassador to China, Nicholas Burns. He was responding to comments by Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth last weekend that war with China, between the United States and China over Taiwan may be, quote, imminent. Well, Nick Burns is a career diplomat. His other postings include serving as United States ambassador to NATO in the second Bush administration. So it was a good opportunity for us to continue the conversation with him, pick his brains about the state of the NATO alliance and the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. So here's some more of our conversation with Ambassador Nick Burns. Ambassador Burns, can I get your thoughts on the current state of the conflict in Ukraine, the role that NATO is playing, the way that certain NATO members, particularly Germany, are increasing their spending and support for Ukraine by a few notches?
This is certainly a key moment for the NATO alliance, and we're just a few weeks away from the NATO summit that will be hosted in Western Europe this year. Key in this respect, the United States has always been at the center of the power of the NATO alliance, both in terms of our military armaments, but also in terms of our political leadership. And, you know, with President Trump, we saw this in his first term. We're seeing it again now. There's a certain amount of diffidence and ambiguity in terms of his own personal commitment to NATO. So I certainly hope, as someone who believes that NATO continues to be vital, that President Trump will decide it's in his and America's best interest that he remain firmly committed to the NATO alliance. Having said that, I also think it's positive that the European allies are beginning to do much more in the way of defense preparedness, particularly Germany. I think you were right to mention it under Chancellor Merz. It's nothing short of historic to see Germany now have this €1 trillion fund to modernize its defense. Germany had been a laggard for decades in its military modernization. To see the leading role of Britain, you know, Britain, of course, out of the EU now for the last 9 years or so, Britain taking a lead in terms of the military alliance, trying to coalesce within NATO with the European partners, and Britain taking the lead in many ways, Prime Minister Starmer, in trying to create a coalition of European countries that would support Ukraine with boots on the ground should there be a ceasefire. So I can see no alternative for the United States but to stay firmly in the middle of NATO, helping our allies to succeed and to, in the greatest security crisis in Europe in many, many decades, to continue to hold off Putin and make sure Putin can't permanently divide Europe again.
Now, some people have suggested that Russia is economically dependent on keeping the Ukraine war going and that Putin's support base simply won't let him end the war without something sizable to show for it. What do you think of that?
Well, I think it's a very interesting question because certainly from a military point of view, Putin has transformed the economy into a military wartime economy. And so to try to snap back from that and try to return to a normal economic structure might be difficult. I think a second factor here is that Putin has described this so-called special military operation in messianic terms for the future of the Russian people. And you've seen this extraordinary rise in nationalism among Russians, quite disturbing to those of us outside the Russian Federation. So I think you're right in your question. It'd be very difficult for Putin and the leadership to suddenly decide they're going to suspend this war. Putin also obviously senses a moment of weakness, particularly during the Trump presidency. He thinks he can essentially continue the war effort, increase military pressure on Ukraine. You've seen this, the brutal bombing of Ukrainian cities and all the people who've died just in the last week. And he thinks Ukraine is vulnerable. The Ukrainians hit back this weekend. And Zelensky and his team have shown that they have a lot of mettle. They have a lot of grit, and they're not going to cave. And so I've been, in the short term over the last couple of weeks, reassured, as President Trump has began to evince publicly a lot of frustrations with Vladimir Putin. Trump was much more positive about the Putin connection several months ago, but the Russians have not met the United States, the Trump administration, halfway, not anywhere close to halfway. They seem to be ignoring the peace suggestions and offerings of the U.S., and perhaps we're seeing a turnaround in the thinking of the Trump administration. I certainly hope so, because I think the United States needs to stand with Ukraine and with our NATO allies in supporting Ukraine.
In recent weeks, President Trump has been threatening to basically walk away if Russia and Ukraine don't get together and reach a peace settlement. Now, that could be a negotiating ploy from Donald Trump, a businessman's tactic of walking away, or he could be serious. If he is serious, what would the implications of that be?
I think it's nearly impossible to walk away. The security interests of the United States dictate that Ukraine must survive this war, and that Russia's attempt, Putin's attempt to take the territory of another country cannot succeed. And so at the end of the day, I strongly believe that the United States will end up supporting, if there is a security force put on the territory of Ukraine by the European countries, I would think the United States would have no option but to support it through air power and other services. We wouldn't have our own boots on the ground, but we would be supportive of them. To do otherwise would be to give Putin a tactical victory, and it would be a disavowal of our NATO allies. And there, it's interesting here in the United States, there is strong public support across the board in the United States for NATO. There's strong public support in the United States Senate and the Republican Party for NATO. So we may be seeing threats designed to motivate people in some of the statements of the U.S. administration. But at the end of the day, we have got to support Ukraine and our allies.
Ambassador, the Senate's currently considering imposing 500% tariffs on countries that buy Russian oil or uranium. But in the past, sanctions don't seem to have affected Russia nearly as much as people would have hoped they would. Would these be any different?
I think the sanctions imposed on the Russian Federation since February 2022, in large part, have been effective. Now, they haven't brought Russia to its knees, obviously, and there has been this shift to a Russian wartime economy. And there has been, they've been trading with the Chinese and Iranians in non-dollar transactions, so they've been able to survive. But I think this new threat, and this is a bipartisan bill, Senator Lindsey Graham, and who's a Republican from South Carolina, and Senator Richard Blumenthal, a Democrat from Connecticut. It's a very powerful bill. They have a majority of U.S. senators signed onto it. But obviously, given President Trump's relationship with the Republican leadership in the Senate and House and here in our Congress, I don't think the bill will be tabled unless the Trump administration agrees to it. And tactically, will President Trump really want to take such an ambitious step right now? I'm a little bit skeptical. He seems to want to give Putin more and more time to reconsider his options, but I don't think Putin's listening to the United States right now. So I think that the fate of this bill will tell us a lot about President Trump's own inclination. And again, I don't think the United States can walk away from this conflict. We've seen too much talk in Washington by the Trump administration in the last 2 weeks, about both Gaza and about Ukraine, that if the parties can't come to peace, we're going to wash our hands of it. That's not how international politics works. And a country like the United States has to stay engaged, certainly with its diplomatic involvement.
And that is all for Planet America's Weekend Edition. We will see you back here next Wednesday night on ABC TV at 9:25 p.m, right after Guy Montgomery's Spelling Bee.
I love the spell, John. How do you spell Pet Podcast?
Toolong.
I don't care as long as you listen to it. It's up right now. Have a listen. See you later. Bye-bye.